Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darren Murphy, and I'd just like to kick off this afternoon's webinar on cover crops. Before I introduce my two guest speakers today, I'd just like to give you a brief introduction to Germinal in terms of who we are for those of you who are unfamiliar with the company. Germinal is a sixth-generation family business. We operate directly in Ireland, GB, and New Zealand with working relationships in over 25 countries. Germinal is a seed specialist providing market-leading solutions for both agriculture and the amenity sectors. Germinal Horizon is our research and development entity that delivers research-driven innovations to improve performance for farmers on an ongoing basis. Our breeding technologies deliver proven performance while providing environmental benefit in the face of growing climate challenges. And the objective of today is to give you information on the benefits cover crops offer and to highlight the ongoing research into cover crops' role in improving water quality in Ireland. As I say, my name is Darren Murphy. I'm the host for today. I'm an area salesman with Germinal for the last 15 years, covering the southeast, Midlands and northwest of the country, helping farmers and agri-merchants with their seed inquiries. I am joined today by Dr. Demi of Teagasc. Demi will present findings from the Agricultural Catchments Programme research on the impact of cover crops and sowing date on nitrogen leaching, as well as the progress that has been made in farmer adoption of cover crops in an arable-dominated catchment in recent years. I'm also joined today by our own Dr. Mary McEvoy. Mary's our technical director here at Germinal. She's been with the company for the last 12 years, and she will present today on the benefits of cover crops and choosing the right mixture for your farm and the importance of using higher voluntary standard seed within cover crops. At this stage, I'm going to ask Demi to just get her slide ready. But in the meantime, I just want to, in terms of what's coming up, Demi's going to speak first on improving water quality, and then we're going to take some questions. After that, then we're going to have Mary, who's going to speak to you about cover crops and selecting the right mixture. And then we're going to take questions again. Any questions you may have, please submit them at the bottom of the screen through the chat function. And it's also important for me to highlight at this stage that there are 6 IASIS points available for today's webinar, which you must remain logged on for the entire duration. So please submit as many questions as you have, and any questions that we can't answer today, we will be sure to answer them when we're sending out the recording afterwards. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Dr. Demi Ryan.
Thanks, Dermot. So my name is Demi Ryan, and I am a research officer with the Agricultural Catchments Programme, and I'm based in Teagasc, Johnstown Castle. So my research focuses on mitigation measures for agricultural nutrient losses to water bodies, but with a specific focus on those measures that go, I suppose, above and beyond what's required by regulation and policy. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why we're interested in catch crops for water quality, how they can help, and then show you some evidence that we've gathered from the ACP on how they impact nitrate leaching, the effect of sowing dates, and how we've seen a huge increase in uptake over the past few years amongst farmers. And just to note that I might refer to cover crops as catch crops interchangeably from force of habit, but essentially I'm referring to the same thing. So from the perspective of water quality, why are we interested in cover crops? So as I'm sure most of you know, under the Water Framework Directive, there's a requirement for all EU member states to achieve at least good status in all water bodies by 2027. However, Ireland still faces challenges with nutrient pressures on our water bodies, particularly with respect to nitrate levels. So currently 43% of our river sites nationally still have unsatisfactory nitrate concentrations, while 27% of our river sites have unsatisfactory phosphate concentrations. And the issue with nitrate is particularly predominant in the south and the east and southeast regions of the country. These areas have the highest nitrate concentrations associated with agriculture, and that's largely due to the free draining soils and lower effective rainfall in this region. So a high proportion of Ireland's tillage sector is located in these regions. And so cover crops are a mitigation measure that's available to tillage farmers to help us to achieve those water quality objectives. So how do cover crops improve water quality? Well, when we leave the soils bare after harvest, there can be residual nitrogen left over from previous fertilizer applications. And that nitrate is very vulnerable to being leached in the drainage season down into the groundwater, especially where we have those free draining soils. However, if we sow cover crop in the fallow period, we can capture a lot of that residual soil nitrate, ultimately removing it from the system, from the soil solution, and therefore reducing the risk of nitrate losses during the drainage season. But I suppose additionally, they can also reduce erosion from the elements by providing a sort of a canopy and protecting the soil surface. And that's going to prevent then the transport of sediment and any nutrients bound to those sediments to nearby watercourses. So just a little bit of a background on the ACP. So it's a water quality monitoring programme that was established in 2008 to evaluate Ireland's Nitrates Action Plan by collecting high frequency water quality monitoring data. So essentially to provide the scientific evidence to support policy and improve environmental outcomes. So there's a total of 6 catchments across the country, and each one was chosen to represent a different type of farming practices and land uses and soil types. So we have one catchment in Wexford, Castledockrell, which is dominated by arable farming and is characterised by free draining soils. So this is an ideal location for us to carry out studies on catch crops. So I'm just going to take you through next some of the info that we've captured on catch crops in recent years within the ACP in terms of the impact of cover crops on nitrate leaching, the impact of sowing date on establishment, and how we've seen a large increase in the uptake of catch crops by catchment farmers in recent years, and how we plan to use that information to study the impacts of stream nitrate concentrations at a catchment scale. So beginning with the nitrate leaching study. So this is a lysimeter study that was run by on a commercial farm in Castledockrell back in 2022, where they looked at the effects of sowing cover crops on nitrogen uptake and nitrate leaching losses as compared to soil that was left fallow or to naturally regenerate. So as you can see, in terms of the crop nitrogen uptake, we have an average of around 30 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare taken up by the cover crop, which was the leafy turnip and forage dirt, as compared to fallow or naturally regeneration treatment, where there was only about 5 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare taken up by the crop. So that's, I suppose, a difference of around 25 kilograms of nitrogen that's potentially left in the soil then vulnerable for leaching. In terms of the nitrate leaching losses, the fallow and natural regeneration treatment lost just over 30 kilograms of nitrate per hectare. Whereas by incorporating the leafy turnip and forage rape cover crop, that reduced to around 10 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. So you can see how incorporating that overwinter cover crop can help capture this residual soil nitrate and prevent the nitrate leaching losses during the drainage season. However, their level of effectiveness does depend on successful establishment. So here I'm showing an ACP study where the impact of sowing date on catch crop yield and then nitrogen uptake were evaluated. So this slide here is the dry matter yield per hectare. So there were 4 sowing dates across 4 sowing dates from early August to early September, each of them color-coded on the chart. And they were sampled on 6 different dates throughout the growing season. So as you can see, the earlier established cover crops in the blue and orange, they achieved a much higher dry matter yield of over 1,500 kilograms per hectare, up to 2,000 kilograms per hectare, in comparison to those sown in September, which I suppose just about achieved 1,000 kilograms per hectare coming towards December. Um, so this is actually something I suppose we would have observed in recent years as well. If we think back to 2024, the weather conditions weren't so good and the harvest was a lot later. So catch crops were a lot later going in. Each year we do a survey in the Castle Dockrell catchment of a few field parcels where we take samples of cover crops for biomass. And um, I suppose what we would have seen from that is that last year in 2025 we had double or more of the biomass on a per hectare basis than we would have seen in 2024, largely due to that later sowing date. Um, that said, it is better late than never. Um, so this is something then that's reflected in the crop nitrogen uptake. So the biomass, higher biomass from the earlier sown dates usually results in higher nitrogen uptake. Again, you can see the earlier sown crops had a higher nitrogen uptake than the later ones. You can see that those sown in early September sort of catch up around December, but I suppose if you have around 20 kilograms of nitrogen captured in the crops in on the 19th of November for the crop sown on the 4th of September, whereas you have around 35 for the earlier sown ones. So that's an extra 15 kilograms of nitrogen that's captured that's not available to be lost to the soil as a result of the earlier sown date. So essentially, this shows the importance of sowing catch crops as early as possible after harvest in order to get a peak crop yield. So the earlier they're established, the more biomass they're going to produce, the more N or nitrogen that they're going to be able to capture from the soil, and the less nitrate that's going to be available to be leached to the groundwater. So moving on to, I suppose you could say a bit of a success story in terms of cover crop uptake in our ACP Castle Dockrell catchment. So over recent years, we began collecting information on the amount of cover crops that were being sown by farmers within the catchment. So we went back as far as 2022 up until 2025. And as you can see, there's been quite a significant increase. So in the lighter green, I have the total sown within the Castle Dockrell catchment, which refers to the amount of cover crop sown within the catchment boundaries. And then in the darker green is the total sown by the Castle Dockrell catchment farmers in total. So regardless of where they were sown, whether they sowed them within the catchment boundary or outside. And that was just to see if the trends we were observing inside the catchment boundaries were reflective of what we were seeing of I suppose, the bigger picture. So we did a bit of an analysis on why did we see the trends that we did. And a lot of it comes down to the different schemes that were available. So in 2022, sorry. Yeah, so in 2022, we saw the end of the GLOS scheme. And under the GLOS scheme, farmers were eligible to sow a maximum of 32 hectares of catch crops for funding. But then that finished and the acres scheme was introduced. And under the acres scheme, there was 20 hectares of of land area available for funding to be sown under under catch crops. Um, and so I suppose one of the reasons then that we saw that little bit of a decrease from 2022 to 2023 was because of this decrease in the amount of area that farmers were eligible to sow, but also for other reasons. But then in 2024, we saw the introduction of the Farming for Water EIP funding. And under the Farming for Water EIP, farmers were eligible to sow a maximum of 20 hectares also. In 2025, then that funding increased to a maximum of 40 hectares. So we saw another quite significant increase in the amount of area sown. But also the good agricultural environmental condition requirements were enforced in 2025. And so under that, farmers could opt to sow a proportion of their land with catch crops as an alternative to crop rotation or diversification requirements. So we saw some farmers opting to do that in the catchment as well. So I suppose what we found was that farmers really like the flexibility of schemes such as the Farmer for Water EIP, because I suppose there's less commitment involved and they're not subject to penalties, such as with other schemes like Glass and Acres. I suppose the application is quite easy, and you just prove what you've sown and you get paid, and farmers seem to prefer this flexibility. And I suppose further evidence of that is that farmers that were already sowing catch crops under acres were also opting to sow additional land under the Farmer for Water EIP. So they were willing to sow more, but I suppose it's that flexibility that they have, and not having to commit to actually sowing them every single year. Just to show you what that looks like then in terms of the catchment area coverage. So in the figures, I have the Castle Dockrell catchment and its various sub-catchments. So in each figure is each year, and the different agri-environmental schemes are colour-coded. So here in the pink we have Glass, and then Acres is in blue throughout the next 3 years, and then we have orange is the EIP, and then yellow is the GAEC 7 requirements. So around 1,100 hectares of, the Castle Dockrell catchment is around 1,100 hectares in size, and the estimated area of that in tillage is around 700 hectares. So as you can see, the proportion of the tillage area in Castle Dockrell that's been sown with catch crops in 2022 was 17%, and that's increased in recent years up to 2025 to 61%. So I suppose that's something that we're really happy to see, and we want to keep the momentum going on. So in terms of upcoming work, how are we going to use that information that we've gathered on the land area sown in Castle Dockrell to study the impacts of water quality? So we are, so as you can see in the map, there's various monitoring points here in our Castle Dockrell catchment. And we're going to, I suppose, incorporate the information from a water quality perspective into the model, as well as the land area sown, as well as various other parameters, to essentially ask the question, is the area of catch crop coverage in the fallow period influencing nitrate concentrations at the catchment or subcatchment scale? And I suppose you might ask, well, why don't you just look at the concentrations in the streams? You had 61% of coverage in 2025. can you see any nitrate reductions in the stream? But I suppose it's not really as simple as that. There's other factors at play, and the weather conditions are the biggest one there, and they're the most influential factor. So we need to incorporate that information when we're trying to understand the trends. And then you also have the likes of legacy nutrients, nutrient storage, which can mask positive effects. And then there's lag times associated with groundwater, and it moves much more slowly as compared to surface water. So it can take time before we see improvements in the stream. So as I said, for these reasons, we need several years of data and catch crop coverage before we'll be able to pick up on these trends and improvements in water quality. So to summarize, by incorporating cover crops, we can significantly reduce nitrogen losses in the fallow period, especially in those areas where we have free draining soils. To achieve the maximum impact from those cover crops, early establishment is a really key factor. We've been very happy to see the farmer interest and adoption of cover crops has been increasing significantly in recent years, and not just in ACP catchments, but also across the country. And so we're very keen to keep that momentum going. And that's it from me.
Perfect, Demi, thank you. Just when you're stopping sharing, Demi, can I ask you, and after getting a few questions in, can I ask you, do you expect to see an increase in the area under cover crops in the Castleknock catchment area to continue to increase going forward?
I suppose that's a tricky one. It really depends. I think a lot of farmers have opted in the Castleknock catchment anyway, have opted to sow as much as they could at this point. There may still be some additional farmers that haven't been opting into the scheme, so there probably is a bit more potential there.
Okay.
But yeah, I suppose it remains to be seen. Yeah.
Okay, time will tell.
Yeah.
Next question, any work going on to other crop species outside of the leafy turnip and the forage rape that you mentioned? Is there any, I suppose, research into using Phacelia vetches, or is it just leafy turnip and rape that you've worked with so far?
Yeah, so I'm not carrying any of those out myself, but there is other work ongoing in Teagasc. Other researchers are looking at things like plantain inclusion in different cover crop mixes. Plantain
Okay.
is known to reduce nitrate losses in grassland studies, so they're looking at including that in cover crop mixes as well. There's also some rotation experiments ongoing where they're looking at how I suppose reducing nitrogen applications and using a cover crop over the fallow period can help with that, and I suppose increase the nitrogen levels available in the soil, and as a result you can reduce the amount of nitrogen fertilizer to be applied. I'm sure there's others as well, but they're the ones that I'm aware of anyway.
Yes, I understand. Is there a relationship between N uptake and biomass? So, so essentially, if you have a cover crop and there's a greater level of biomass, is there a clear correlation between that and nitrogen uptake?
Yes and no. So there is the more biomass you have, I suppose, the more nitrate the cover crop is going to be able to take up. So the larger surface area, the more nitrate it can incorporate. But I suppose sometimes there might not be as much nitrate there in the soil for the cover crop to take up. Do you know if that makes sense?
Okay. So you could have a year like 2025 where the weather just the weather was just particularly favorable and it did absolutely wonderful, but they may not have actually scavenged a huge amount of nitrogen. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Okay,
essentially.
very good. Um, two remaining questions before I let you off the hook, if that's okay. When is the latest you would recommend sow a cover crop? I presume September, early September, or
Yeah. Look, the earlier the better as well. I'd say I wouldn't give a later
yes.
a threshold.
Yes. Well,
Um,
when I started in Germany years ago, I was told a day's growth in July was worth a week in August, was worth a month in September. So I agree 100%. The earlier you can get it into the ground, the better.
yeah.
Um, and finally, the last question, but I presume that you're after alluding to this already, is when does the NMP become available to the subsequent crop? But I think you're after alluding to the fact that there's research going on in that area at the moment, I suppose, to get a more accurate answer, is there?
Yeah, look, I suppose when it's plowed back into the soil, obviously it's going to release, but it's just going to be a much slower release what than if we were to just leave the soil bare and let the nitrate be lost. But yeah, there probably is a benefit of incorporating the cover crop back into the soil um, before the next sowing. So yeah, there's there's research that still needs to be done on that. So I suppose how much
I
can
think
we reduce our nitrogen by and but
Yes.
yeah.
I think typically, from speaking to a lot of farmers, I think they usually would try to go out and desiccate it or plough back in or whatever the case may be, perhaps a month before, a month or 6 weeks before to go up to sow spring crop. But Demi, thank you very much. Yep, as I say, any more questions,
Need
please submit them through the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And at this stage, I'm going to call on our own Dr. Mary McEvoy.
Thanks very much, Dermot. So just to follow on, I suppose, from what Demi was talking about, I'm going to speak a little bit more maybe about the differences between the different species that we use within the cover crop schemes, and also a little bit about the two schemes that are in place there at the minute as well. So look, I think as Demi has said, one of the really big benefits that we see from cover crops, it's their ability to capture nitrogen and I suppose improve water quality. And there's, definite massive benefits at an industry level from that perspective, I suppose. And I suppose when we talk about cover crops or catch crops, the terminology is somewhat interchangeable. Catch crops essentially catch nutrients and prevent them from being leached. Cover crops cover and protect the soil. And then we also have the term green manure, which improves soil organic matter by returning plant material to the soil as they decompose. And I suppose in terms of what we do here in Ireland with our cover crops, most of the mixes that are being used are doing a combination of all three of those. So the purpose of today, I'm going to focus on the words cover crops or catch crops, but it does include kind of green manure as well. So I suppose, as Demi has said, one of the big benefits is the nitrogen capture and reducing what's being leached into our waterways. But other benefits, I suppose, that maybe are more tangible at farm level are the improvements in terms of soil health. So we're protecting the soil by sowing a cover crop. When we get these deluges of rain that are falling on the ground, we're reducing, I suppose, the erosion that's caused by that, really heavy rainfall that we're seeing over the last number of winters. So it's less damaging to our soils. So that's preventing soil structural degradation. And also we're reducing surface runoff. So it's helping stop soil essentially being washed off fields and down onto roadways. We've seen improvement in soil structure where we have cover crops, and I suppose the more diverse species that we can include in a cover crop mixture will have a greater impact on this because different species will have different root structures and different rooting depths, and that'll allow breakup of compaction that might happen in the top couple of inches of the soil. Also, as those roots are decaying, they're going to help build up organic matter, and they're improving water infiltration and aeration due to, I suppose, the channels that are being created by the roots. And as they decay, those channels are left open, and that allows water infiltrate through the soil better, improves aeration of the soil, and we also see probably improvements in terms of earthworm counts in soils which have cover crops as well. So I'm not going to go into the nitrogen capture. I think Demi has covered that off extremely well, but it's a huge benefit, I suppose, of cover crops. And we're also seeing phosphorus capture. So phosphorus is more likely to run off over the surface of the ground rather than leach through the ground that we see with nitrogen. But again, having cover crops in place, helps prevent that overland flow or surface runoff and reduces phosphorus losses into our waters as well, which is crucially important. Cover crops are often sown for a livestock forage, so some species do provide, quite a lot of winter forage in a relatively short sowing period. But I suppose, we need to keep in mind in terms of the schemes that are there, we want to minimise, any damage to the soils. So there are some limitations in terms of how we can graze them from a livestock perspective. The actual benefits we see from our cover crops will very much depend on the species which we use. The sowing dates is critically important, and I'll show you some information on that later, but the later sown are having less of an impact. And obviously on how well they establish as well. So trying to establish cover crops maybe when we're in the middle of a drought can be a challenge, and maybe might inhibit maybe the successful establishment of them. Choosing the wrong cover crop can have a negative impact as well, and we need to keep that in mind. It's about choosing the right crop for the right field on your farm. We do see with certain cover crops there is potential for a carryover of pests and diseases caused by a green bridge. So we need to keep that in mind when looking at the right mixture for a particular rotation. So just to have a quick look, and most of you will be well familiar with this, but this is the prescribed catch crop species list from acres, and it's a similar list is adhered to within the Farming for Water EIP scheme for their cover crop measure. Okay, so the different species have different sown rates, and the rates I am giving here are all for a monoculture rate. We must sow at least 2 species for the schemes, so at least 2 species from this list must be sown, and no one variety can account for more than 60% of the mixture. Okay, you see fodder radish here as one of the brassicas. That's also known as oilseed radish. Those 2 terms are interchangeable for that species, so it is just something to bear in mind as well. But I suppose brassicas and legumes, make up a large proportion of the cover crops that we use. We also see other species such as oats, black oats and furry dry. And linseed from Celia can be quite popular as a cover crop or in a cover crop mixture as well. So looking at the breakdown of the 2 schemes, and I suppose, look, anytime you're subscribing to a scheme, it's also really important that you adhere to the full terms and conditions of that scheme. I'm just outlining a few critical points here, but as always, refer to the terms and conditions to make sure you're fully compliant with both schemes. So for acres, the requirement is to sow by the 15th of September. And on occasion, I suppose there has been a bit of leeway on that when we got, late harvests and didn't have the chance to get cover crops into the ground by the 15th of September. But really, the later we see these crops going in, the less of a benefit that we tend to get from them. Those crops need then to remain in place until the 1st of January. And as Demi has said, up to 20 hectares can be sown within the acre scheme. And by comparison, I suppose, for the Farming for Water EIP, there's 2 sowing deadlines. One for the winter cropping systems requires you to sow by the 1st of August and remain in place until the 30th of September. And the spring cropping system, or the other cropping system as it's referred to, is sow no later than the 1st of September. But ideally, we'd really need to sow those as early as possible, as we have said already. And again, that must remain in place until the 1st of January, with up to 40 hectares allowable within the Farming for Water EIP scheme. Across both schemes, they must be established using non-inversion techniques, so ploughing is not allowed. They can only be claimed on tillage parcels. And I suppose when it comes to grazing of these, it does stipulate within the acre scheme, and Farming for Water is similar, I'm sure, that grazing can only take place on parcels where soil erosion is not considered an issue, and intensive strip grazing or zero grazing is not permitted. So, it is very extensive grazing that is permissible only on these. But I suppose, we need to think of these crops in terms of the benefits they can bring from a soil health and building organic matter in the soil. So, that's the real benefits of your cover crops. Just having a quick look and breaking down, I suppose, the different categories of species. And, when we're selecting cover crops, it's really important that we choose the right cover crop species for your farm. So it's important to consider factors such as, the root structure, the growth profile of the different species, and also, I suppose, really important to consider your rotation. Okay, so for example, if you have oilseed rape in your rotation, you're going to want to avoid having any brassicas in your cover crop because of the buildup of club root and the risk of disease that can be created there. So your rotation is the first and foremost consideration factor, I suppose, when it comes to choosing your cover crops. After that, then we need to consider the benefit that we require. So different species will bring different benefits. And also how we're going to destruct the cover crop at the end of its lifetime there as well. So some species, for example, like mustard, are more challenging to destruct compared to, for example, legumes, which will break down very easily after the winter. In terms of the permissible species in the kind of cereal category, we have oats, black oats, and forage rye. So the benefits here is the potential source of livestock forage from these species, but they do bring a risk of a green bridge, can have carryover pests and diseases into the subsequent cereal crop, and probably are less suitable with reduced tillage systems. Okay. In terms of the brassicas, so you have fodder rape, white and brown mustard, tillage, and fodder radish, which is also known as oilseed radish, as I mentioned already, a rape kale hybrid, and leafy turnip. So the benefits here, these are easily established and very quick to get going. They provide a good winter break in cereal rotations, provide obviously a very good source of livestock forage. They probably have the greatest capacity for above ground biomass of all the cover crop species. And one of the benefits of fodder radish or oilseed radish is its ability to suppress nematodes. So that can have, they can be really useful, I suppose, in potato or beet rotations. The cons of your brassicas is that they do present a club root risk. So they're not suitable where oilseed rape is in rotation. And we're probably starting to see where brassicas have been sown year in, year out for cover crops. We're starting to see a bit of club root build up in those soils. So that can be an issue. And obviously, because of the above ground biomass, brassicas can be quite challenging to incorporate if they are poorly grazed out. Okay. The legumes, I suppose, the ones allowable within the schemes are crimson, berseem, balances, grouse, and red clover. And then we have peas, beans, and vetch. And I suppose peas and beans tend not to suit, well, winter peas work okay in cover crop scenarios, but, generally peas and beans need to be sown earlier to get the best out of them. The benefits of your legumes, obviously, they're going to fix nitrogen and may reduce nitrogen requirement in the subsequent crop. There's research ongoing to try to quantify this because I suppose with later sown legumes, they're not going to have the same potential to fix nitrogen compared to something that would be sown, for example, in the spring. Legumes do provide a good winter break in cereal rotations. With legumes, it's really important that they are sown with another species that can mop up any nitrogen that they do happen to produce, because there is a risk of leaching with legumes if there is no companion crop. The later we go in terms of our sowing date for cover crops, the more difficult it will be to establish your legumes. They are, I suppose, softer, maybe for want of a better word, and they need better temperatures to get going and get established. And they're also very poor at suppressing weeds. Other species which are allowable are buckwheat, which provides very quick soil cover. It's a good weed suppressant, improves soil health, and is considered a very good phosphorus harvester. So harvest phosphorus out of the soil and maintains it there to prevent it being lost. It does have poor frost tolerance, but one thing to consider with buckwheat is it's important to kill it within about 7 to 10 days of flowering to avoid a weed issue in subsequent crops. Linseed tends to do quite well on tin soils, not a hardy crop, so breaks down easily with frost over the winter. Phacelia would be very popular, I suppose, within cover crop mixtures because it's fast establishing, it's competitive, and it's a very good weed suppressor. So it does really well and would be widely used in a lot of different cover crop mixes. Just to look at some work that we did ourselves where we sowed some different species, but monocultures and mixtures. These were sown back in 2024. They were sown in early August, around the 7th of August. And this is just looking at the establishment of some of the different species 6 weeks post-sowing. So you can see buckwheat is the far left, tillage radish then is the second from left, berseem clover, second from right, and leafy turnip on the far right. So you can see very good establishment with those crops which are sown in August. Massive ground cover, I suppose, very early. So that'll suppress weeds and really do a really good job in protecting the soil from erosion. Looking at, I suppose, the performance of some of those mixtures, and this isn't a replicated trial, it was just look-see on a demo site rather than, it's been, a trial which was tested from a statistical significance perspective. But you can see in terms of the left-hand side there, I have the mixtures in blue. Soil Booster Pro was a two-way mixture back then. And then we have Soil Booster Graze, which was a leafy turnip, and forage rape. Soil Booster Gold is there as well. And we also have Soil Booster Non-Brassica Grazer and a diverse mixture. So you can see the performance of the mixes generally outperformed the monocultures of the individual or the monocultures of the species there as well. So again, there is a benefit to sown mixtures. We tend to see an improvement in overall dry matter yield and above ground biomass by having mixtures compared to monocultures sown. This is just a visual, I suppose, demonstration of differences in terms of sown date. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor there. Hang on.
Can, Mary? I could a second ago.
You can you? Okay.
It was, yeah.
So up here at the top, you can see that's mustard starting to flare there. So this was a Soil Booster Gold mixture, which was sown on the 7th of August. And in the foreground of this picture, it was the same mixture, which was sown a month later. And this picture was taken in late October. So you can see a significant difference in terms of the performance of those two mixes when they're the same mixture with a month apart in the sown date. So it's again just, I suppose, reiterating what Demi has said already about the importance of sown early to get the most out of these crops. In terms of choosing cover crops, I suppose, first and foremost, it's really important that you consider or you only purchase higher voluntary standard cover crop seed for the coming year. So a lot of you will be aware of the HVS that has been associated with cover crops for the last 2 years. And this is an agreement from within the Irish Seed Trade Association members to adhere to HVS for cover crops. So these crops are certified to be free from wild oat, sterile brome and blackgrass, okay? The testing of the cover crops is conducted by an internationally accredited seed laboratory, which is a seed lab which is accredited to the International Seed Testing Association. So it might be done by a lab in Europe, or it might be done by the Department of Agriculture. Is the only accredited body here in Ireland. But I suppose it gives the assurance that the cover crop mixes you're purchasing for your farm are free of those tree problem weeds. And I suppose it's really important to only buy HVS seed. You can see on the label when you purchase your cover crop seed, it should state on the label, I suppose, below the green, in the white part of the label, that this seed has been tested and is free of those tree species. And to keep in mind that there are some cover crop mixtures which come into the country which are blended abroad and come in as a mixture, and they will not have this HVS standard associated with them. So there is a risk by buying in imported cover crop seed mixtures that you could be importing some problems onto your farm as well. So I would encourage all farmers to ensure when purchasing cover crops this year, they ensure it is to a HVS standard, and that is printed on the label of the cover crop. That's how you know that it is meeting the standards required. Just quickly to run through, I suppose, our own mixtures for the coming year. We have our Soil Booster Graze, which is a 2 hectare pack containing forage rape and leafy turnips. Very quick to establish, green cover, as we said already. Will mop up excess nitrogen in the soil, so help reduce nitrogen leaching. And benefits from below ground in terms of improving drainage, aeration and reducing soil erosion, while providing high energy for winter grazing. But if you are sowing it as part of a scheme, they, as I said already, cannot be intensively grazed and cannot be grazed until after the 1st of January. With the likes of a forage rape or leafy turnip that is being grazed, we would also always encourage that if you are grazing it, it is grazed before the end of February. From an animal health perspective, it is important to graze it before it starts to flare. Our Soil Booster Non-Brassica Grazer. So this is a grazing option where oilseed rape is in rotation. It's a 1/2 hectare pack, contains vetch, crimson clover and oats. Quick to establish, will fix nitrogen from the vetch, has the potential to do that there. And it's also an option, I suppose, where club root is a risk if you do want something suitable for grazing, but probably won't yield as well as the likes of the leafy turnip forage rape mixture. So that is important to keep in mind. Soil Booster Pro, again, this is a really good option. It doesn't contain any brassicas, so a really good option where oilseed rape is in rotation. Quick to establish, provides really good canopy cover, which will protect the soil from erosion. Contains vetch, phacelia, crimson clover, and berseem clover. Good at suppressing weeds. The vetch and the clovers can fix nitrogen, and again, a really good root system to improve soil health and soil structure below ground as well. And then finally, our Soil Booster Gold is our more diverse mixture. It's in a 1 hectare pack. Contains psyllid radish, fodder radish, there's white mustard, brown mustard, crimson clover, linseed, and phacelia in this. So good diverse range of species. And that is going to again improve aeration, protect the soil from erosion, allow better water infiltration, and mop up any surplus nitrogen that is in the soil to help prevent leaching. So that's just a really quick run through on the mixes that we have. But again, if you want to speak to any of the German area sales managers, they'll go through them in more detail. So just to summarise, there are multiple benefits that we can achieve from cover crops, but the timing of sowing will influence the impact that we do see from them. So the earlier sown, we've said it multiple times already, the greater the benefit we're likely to see. Species choice does matter. Consider your rotation and make sure you're taking your rotation into consideration when choosing the right species and the right mixture for your own system. And as I said, it is really important that we do look for higher voluntary standard cover crop seed in mixtures for the coming year to protect your farms from potential weed problems. So look, that's it from me. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and if there's any questions, we'll take them there.
Thank you, Mary. Bad news is, Mary, there is some questions for you. So yeah, like Demi, we can't let you off the hook either. Club root. Are you seeing club root where brassicas are being used continuously? I assume that's in perhaps a spring barley situation where it's going from spring barley to brassicas, spring barley to brassicas. Are you seeing club root becoming more popular?
Yeah, look, I mean, cover crops have been on the go now for a good number of years at this stage, Dermot, and over the last couple of years, yeah, where somebody was continuously using brassicas in their cover crop mixtures, and I suppose by that in particular, I suppose where we see it is where the likes of a leafy turnip and a forage drape are being used. That where it's a very intensive brassica mixture. The two species included are brassicas. We have started to see some club root issues in cover crop brassica mixtures, yeah, as a result of just sowing the same brassicas year in, or year in, year out in the same field. So yeah, that is definitely becoming a problem. So like there are ways around it, I suppose. Look, I suppose the brassica is the cheapest option from a farmer's perspective to sow, but there are the likes of phacelia, your clovers, your vetches, which can provide a good alternative to reduce that risk. So if it was in terms of a forage perspective, and someone was sowing a brassica in the likes of July, for example, we would never recommend somebody sows a brassica 2 years on the trot to reduce the risk of club root. From in that tillage scenario when maybe they're going in late August, early September, it's not that much later. So I would say after maybe 2 or 3 years of a brassica, you should definitely be considering looking to something else to avoid a potential risk.
And also, I suppose, as oilseed rape becomes more popular, maybe people will be less inclined to go with a brassica mixture and will be more inclined to lean towards an oilseed rape friendly mixture. So maybe that will help the situation too, I guess, man.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, I think we probably would have seen more of a shift away from maybe the brassica in last year, maybe, and it'll take more than 1 year to tell the true story,
Absolutely.
I suppose. But I think we are starting to see more interest in, the likes of the vetches, phacelias, and other species over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what mixture would you recommend, or what cover crop mixture would you recommend going in after perhaps a winter barley or winter wheat, if peas or beans were then hoping to go in the following spring?
So if peas and beans are going in subsequently, so like you wouldn't go with a legume followed by your legume as such. So you prefer to see something different compared to other than legumes going into that cover crop. So something, Dermot, probably along the lines of phacelia, maybe forage rye, linseed, something along the lines of that. Just don't follow a legume cover crop with your pea and bean legume. So consider something different there.
Okay. I have 2 questions left. Is there and I think you've alluded to this earlier, Mary, is there a benefit of using a multi-species, or I suppose a diverse species mixture above using a standard 2 or 3 way mix? So essentially, if there's a mixture out there with maybe 6 or 8 species, Mary, is there a benefit of using that above your 2 way mix, for example?
Yeah, so yeah, look, I mean, I do think like when we have a slightly more diverse, and there's probably an upper limit on that as well, Dermot, but there when we have more than two species, different species are going to bring different benefits to the soil. So we'll have different root structures. So some will have deeper tap roots, some will have more hair-like root structures. So the different root structures will bring a big benefits from a soil health perspective, but also above ground. So some cover crops are better probably at covering the soil. Some are better at maybe not mopping up nutrients and that side of things. So there is a benefit, I think, of having maybe 6 or 7 species in as your upper limit, probably in a cover crop mixture. Even up to 8, but probably I wouldn't go too much more above that, because then you start to maybe not really see the benefits of those species you're sowing. Whereas, yeah, so I do like to see a little bit more diversity in the cover crops. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And the last question, but I don't think it's a question that we can answer, is the EIP scheme being expanded? And yeah, I think I might take on that one myself and say that we do not know. For the time being, we are aware that anyone who was accepted into the EIP scheme in 2025 will remain in it for 2026, 2027, 2028. And we're hoping to expand it further to 29 and 30, but we do not know that. I think anyone who got into it last year is in it for this year and next year again for sure. And after that, we don't know. And yeah, that is it. So at this stage, I'd like to thank you everybody for attending. We are going to email out a recording of this along with all the questions and any questions which we haven't been able to answer. And as Mary said, if you have any questions regarding anything we discussed today, please reach out to your local journal area representative. Thanks again for attending.